Hi, this is adamberkowitz. Here with my dear friend David Nekrutman. Um, I always turn to him when I need explanations of truly confusing things. And there's a lot, there's an absurd amount of things happening right now. If I look a little tired, it's because I was up most of the night. Israel was attacked. There were over 300 um, things, drones, ICBMs, cruise missiles fired at Israel from Iran. 99% of them were intercepted. We've got the guy Iron Dome, we've got God. It's an unbeatable combination. Um, but one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to talk. I had planned on speaking about Tucker Carlson and his recent comments about Israel. And rather than, say, oh, let's forget about that, let's move on. If anything, the situation in Israel underscores how important Tucker Carlson's break with Israel is, because Israel needs America. And to be honest, I think America needs Israel too. So what basically happened was Tucker Carlson, he did a interview with a Palestinian Christian um, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, and he framed it in a way. Well, I'll let David tell us about it, but Tucker Carlson is not just uh, he's not just a newscaster. He's I think an institution unto himself. When he broke off from Fox, he really didn't lose speed. He's got that many followers, and he represents, I believe, a school of thought within the Christian right wing. So, David, could you tell me how you see what Tucker did?
Okay, so I want to dissect a little bit of a lot of the statements that you've done. First of all, we want
Okay.
to pray for the 7-year-old Bedouin that was hurt last night because of the Iranian arsenal that came to Israel last night. I share the same deprivation of sleep as you do, because I stay up most of the night trying to figure out what would be the next move because Netanya, which where I live, usually doesn't get much attention as far as projectiles, an arsenal, and missiles. But yesterday we actually saw over our town.
Oh, dude, I
Uh,
live in Katsrin, this tiny little town, 5,000, no, 7,000 people in the Golan, and I haven't really seen if any rockets fell in the town, but they very well might have. I've never heard anything like it.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So
and there were
if we don't sound coherent, I
rockets
think
over
it's important.
Jerusalem. It was
Yeah.
crazy. This was not a
No,
small
no.
attack.
My friend Peter Fast, CEO of Bridges for Peace, was sharing with me in real time of what was going with him in Jerusalem, and then I showed him what was happening in Netanya. So I just want to share with your listeners, if we sometimes don't sound coherent, it's because of a lack of sleep deprivation from last night. But the original intention was to come today to talk about Tucker Carlson's interview with Reverend Munther Isaac, who is part of Bethlehem Bible College, the
Who is he?
Kairos
What does that
document.
mean? Who is he?
He is a well-known Palestinian Lutheran theologian and pastor who clearly is anti-Semitic, who puts Jesus in the context of a Palestinian under occupation. His most famous speech was during Christmas, Jesus under the rubble, and that got a lot of attention, putting Jesus in a Palestinian garb, and the Church of the Nativity scene was rubble, and he's looking at Jesus solely from what we would call, from a theological point of view, replacement theological lens, that the church has replaced Israel, that the Jews, he thinks that the Jews currently living in Israel are not the real authentic Jews. And at the end of the day, the church replaced Israel. There's no covenant with the Jewish people. The return of the Jewish people back to Israel is nothing of a fulfillment of biblical prophecy as laid out in the Hebrew Bible. So he clearly comes from that perspective. And obviously, if you're interviewing him, he's going to not only come from a Christian theological lens of replacement theology, he's also, at the end of the day, a Palestinian pastor in Bethlehem under the governing entity of the Palestinian Authority, who's addressing issues related to Christian Gazans that's under the governing entity of Hamas. So even if he wishes, which I don't think he does, wishes to have any sentiment towards Israel or having a real balanced view from a Palestinian perspective on it, he can't, because if he does, he would be killed. Fact.
That's
Okay, so you have
would
to
you
be.
say would you say the Palestinian, or not Palestinian, I hate that term, Arab Christians, they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because on one hand they generally live closer to the Palestinian Muslims, and there are difficulties in their relationships with the Israeli government and with Israel.
Right, but I think what's important when you look at the Tucker Carlson interview is he's not honest in saying anything about Hamas. To take the blame and solely put it on Israel is quite interesting, since we haven't governed Gaza since 2005. We pulled out from Gaza. Palestinian authorities in charge of Judea, which is known in the world as the West Bank. That's it. You know, Hamas threw out the Palestinian Authority from Gaza. We were the ones who gave over Gaza to the Palestinian Authority. The Gazans elected Hamas to be their representative governing entity, and instead of delivering, which would they had the money to do this, deliver amazing amount of humanitarian aid and build up Gaza Beach as the Holy Land Riviera, they decided to
Which
take
it
that
actually
money.
kind of was on its way to being before Israel pulled out. It was a
100%.
thriving industry, thriving agriculture. It was a great place to live.
Not only that, the Israeli communities that pulled out literally left them
Yeah.
an entire agricultural economy to take over, and Hamas burnt that. But be as it may, you don't see one iota of criticism from this Palestinian Christian pastor against Hamas.
You know,
And that's
if
number
I
one.
may, that point is actually so glaringly present in any attempts at dialogue that I've seen, where if there's a person who can't even admit any level of guilt for Hamas on October 7th, what kind of dialogue can you have with them? You know,
Well, it's even
it's
worse. It's
absurd
even worse.
to think
It's worse.
that
It's
it's
worse.
true, but it's incredibly prevalent.
He's praising the Palestinian resistance of what happened on October 7th. That's even worse. Like, he can't come to terms even
Yeah.
to condemn what happened on October 7th. But if he did, then he wouldn't be talking on Tucker Carlson. So we have to
Why?
differentiate
Do you
between.
think Tucker? Yeah, so
Oh,
shouldn't
if
Tucker have called him on that? Called his bluff and said,
no, well, there's two separate. You were asking me about him. You're asking me about
okay,
Munther Isaac. Then we can get to Tucker Carlson, because
okay.
I think saying conservative and Christian doesn't necessarily go hand in hand. I think there's a difference between a Christian and someone who's conservative in politics, and you don't necessarily have to be both. So we'll dissect that in a minute. But you threw a lot of things in your introduction that I think that needs to be nuanced just a little bit,
It's very
because I
characteristic
don't
of
want to.
me.
It's fine, but as you know, you're interviewing me, and
Yeah.
I like to take a nuanced approach. I'm not the only reason why I am commenting is because at the end of the day, Tucker Carlson is an influential person. And what's quite fascinating is a Jon Stewart, who I would call a court Jew of the world, is now seems to be in agreement with Tucker Carlson, but they're coming at it from two different perspectives. One is that Jon Stewart's belief system is nothing related to the Bible or God. It's simply social justice in the moment, where Tucker Carlson's perspective on the world is an isolationist view, which is an old school thought that goes back to the beginnings of the United States, but actually affected things during World War II, where the United States had an isolationist view until the attack on Pearl Harbor, and then the United States got involved. And then, both on the right and the left throughout after World War II is, where does America come and intervene? Because during the Vietnam War, the liberal side of America didn't want America to be involved in any of the wars that are out there. So, and then from the conservative point of view, or a mixed bag of things during World War II, the beginnings of that, you had America first, an isolationist view. Again, the purpose of it when America started was to be able to build up America. So if you have a unilateral position, not intervening on anything, building up your economy, which is what the United States did primarily 18th and 19th centuries. But when it came into the 20th century, where a war can literally come to your doorstep, then eventually the United States had to get involved. And then you have this thing of going back and forth of how involved is America in relation to other governments and other issues affecting us. So obviously this comes to the forefront because Biden, the US president, and Benjamin Netanyahu being the prime minister of Israel, there is a difference in policy in regard to the day-to-day operations of what's happening in Gaza. And that debate is being amplified by the pundits like Tucker Carlson and a Jon Stewart on both sides of the aisle, and saying, well, we need to look at this, we need to assess this. Is it really necessary for the United States to be involved in this altogether? Should we take a different approach? How much can you criticize the policies of the Israeli government? How do you make sure that criticism of the Israeli government policies doesn't turn into anti-Semitism? This is stuff that I think we have to carefully nuance. Because not every...
We have to nuance it, but I think you're actually magnifying the importance of it. In that Tucker Carlson is not just Tucker Carlson. He's actually bringing forward a school of thought that may have been percolating under the surface.
Correct. I mean, again, Ben Shapiro, who we know has been a big defender on the conservative side and being very pro-Israel and believing, as we do in Israel, that Hamas needs to be eliminated. How far does that elimination must take fruit is a question and debate with even an Israeli society.
We also have people like Douglas Murray, who is even, I think, if anything, more extreme than Ben Shapiro. And his interest is that for the interests of Great Britain and for the interests of Western society, Hamas has to be taken out. And that's
I think that,
totally counter to Tucker.
I think you'll have an agreement that Hamas needs to be taken out. I mean, the biggest thing that's really been on the left side, on the liberal side of the aisle, is the proportionality of Israel's response to October 7th. You hear this in Piers Morgan every day in his show. He's always dealing with the proportionality thing. I mean, it's almost become a nauseating slogan of his, because at the end of the day, he comes along, he says, you have to condemn October 7th.
And you're right.
Is Israel's response
didn't talk
correct?
About proportionality.
Right. Right. Tucker Carlson is very much that America first, to the point where America does not have to be involved in any other government's issues, nor should we be funding anything, including the war in Ukraine, wherever your listenership is on that side of the aisle. But at the end of the day, from a Tucker Carlson point of view, he has a pretty much an isolationist view of not being involved. The problem with this is that Tucker Carlson, not once through the interview, is talking about the American hostages still
Right.
in Gaza. So wait a second, where does your America First come into play? So you're okay if Americans are still in Gaza? Were you okay that Americans were also killed on October 7th? Were you okay that Americans were killed on October 7th or wounded on October 7th? For some reason, Tucker Carlson could throw that away and just simply deal with his world political view. And since he's not in favor of the Ukraine war, he's not going to be in favor of this. And I believe using Christians was a way to amplify his view. And I think this is the wrong way that Tucker Carlson used this, because at the end of the day, you know me, Adam. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I actually help out the Palestinian Christians.
That's why I wanted to talk to you. Yeah.
I actually help out. So I had never heard that Tucker Carlson is helping out the Voice of the Martyrs, which is probably the primary organizations that help out the persecuted Christians around the world, specifically in the Middle East. And there have been other Christian organizations that come to help out Christians in the Holy Land. I didn't hear Tucker Carlson really sympathize with the Christian plight in the Holy Land until right now. And I even quote him when he had his beef with Cuomo, who was part of CNN. And Cuomo and Tucker Carlson got together recently, the last few months. Cuomo was telling Carlson, "Why did you go after me?" And he basically said, I was wrong. You were low hanging fruit, and he took advantage of the moment. He acted not in a gentlemanly manner. He used a different word for that, which I don't want to repeat on your podcast, but he didn't act correctly. And he admits that. And I think in this case, he's also doing the same thing. He's acting like that, not in a gentlemanly manner. He's taking advantage of a moment of his political view. I think there's also an issue of him in the conservative world in competition with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro's network, along with what's happening with Candace Owen and everything else. The whole entire conservative world is sort of, each one is eating their own. But Tucker Carlson, because he has a major following, is taking advantage of the moment right now. And then he is shopping this view of that we need to take a step back away from the Middle East.
So would you say that
even though
he's catering to a certain crowd?
No, I think he's catering to his ego. I just never seen Tucker Carlson do anything else besides amplify his own ego. Does he have interest of America? Yes, there's no question about that. But at the end of the day, he's a pundit. He has a big following. He has to do something that's outrageous. So let's take somebody like a Reverend Isaac, Munther Isaac, who we know will definitely have a lot of clicks for the interview. As of today, I think there's almost 9 million people have viewed this particular segment.
Oh my gosh.
Which at the end of the day, Tucker Carlson, from a pure PR perspective, he won. He got people to go ahead and talk about it. Even you and I are talking about it right now. I even asked you beforehand, what would be the angle for us to talk about this besides repeating everybody's bashing of Tucker Carlson for having this Palestinian Lutheran pastor on the show. And I believe that the only reason why I agreed to talk about this with you was, can we bring a more nuanced approach that we're trying to discuss right now to the forefront, where Reverend Munther Isaac is a pure representation of a large segment in Christianity that does not look at the Jewish people as a covenanted faith people, that we did lose that covenant with God for the rejection of Jesus.
It's the whole group. There's a school of thought.
This is the reason why I'm actually sitting with you today. Because
there is a school of thought in America. I've heard from Christians who say, there are Christians who say, as a Christian, it's my obligation to the Jewish people to support them. And then I've heard precisely the opposite. Christians who say, as a Christian, why would I have an obligation to support the Jewish people? So
right. So
it does go
you and
I
have had this discussion. What is the norm? Is the norm that an average Christian, as a Christian, believes that the Jewish people are covenanted and that the return of the Jewish people back to Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy? Is that the mainstream? or is that a minority perspective? And I have always argued throughout the years that is a remnant within Christendom. I think most Christians, from a Christian perspective, do not look at the Jewish people and its full actualization of identity, that we're a faith covenanted still, that was never broken, and that part of that faith is connected to this land, that I can't be fully who I am as a Jew without being in this land. And that takes the form of statehood. And my belief is that most Christians are not in that particular perspective. The ones that we deal with on an everyday basis, and this is why the shock is the shock with the Tucker Carlson, is we think that no, Christians believe that the Jewish people are a covenant, and not only that, everything else that's happening in the state of Israel is part of biblical prophecy. And wow, I can't believe that Tucker Carlson doesn't subscribe to that. And I'm saying to you today, and this is the reason why I'm sitting down with you, is Tucker Carlson believes that no, he doesn't believe like the Christians that we deal with that have a heart for Israel, that actively work on that calling and actually support Israel in the way they do. So for Tucker to go ahead and have a Reverend Munther Isaac on, for me, that's like, okay, yeah, I expected that.
Oh, okay. So I want to put a little bit of a framework around this. You touched on this, and yeah, I think I've certainly been spoiled. And I think you can understand why our connection came about. I was writing articles for what was then Breaking Israel News, now Israel 365, and about Christian Zionists and the connection between Israel and Christians. And I think I did get very spoiled. I thought that the mainstream Christianity was, yeah, Jews are, they're back, and it's prophecy, and it's the manifestation, and the covenant. And I guess I was either shielded from or forgot that there is a large segment of Christianity that says, no, the Jews blew it. They are out of the covenant. And so these people who are going up to Israel who claim to be Jews, well, that has nothing to do with the Bible. Okay.
Right. And
And
not only
that's,
that, I mean, the Palestinian pastor comes from the Lutheran movement, right? And Martin Luther wasn't a fan of the Jewish people. I mean, his dying words was, we need to get the Jews out of Germany. Forget about what he wrote in Table Talks in regard to the Jews. Martin Luther is extremely anti-Semitic. I mean, Martin Luther would have a big problem today how the Jews ended up back in Israel, because his whole thing of showing that God is not with the Jewish people is because they're not in the land, which is an argument that we see in the book of Deuteronomy. They will say, where is your God? Because you're not in the land. All right. So at the end, Martin Luther took that, wrote a book about that, went against the Jews, and caused anti-Semitism within the Protestant movement in history. So an average Lutheran pastor might be okay with the Jew in the diaspora, but the Jew in the state of Israel as a power, that's very hard for, I would say, the mainstream of some Lutherans to accept. And for someone who is living in Bethlehem and then go and try to come to terms with what this means that the Jewish people have returned, is if for Munther, it's kind of hard. But for Tucker Carlson, you can't expect Tucker to fall in line. And I won't call it Christian Zionism. I believe that that label
yeah.
really puts people in the box. I rather just say Christians who have an active calling for Israel, wherever their journey is not something that Tucker is subscribing to. Tucker is pretty much a conservative. I don't know how much his Christianity's really come out through his shows, because the way he presents himself, I would argue, is not a very Christian way to do a show like he does.
He also,
And to slander and to, like, there are things that he is violating from the Bible that Jesus would frown upon.
which there's another thing I wanted to touch on, which, okay, if he has this isolationist political agenda, okay, it's politics, I can understand. It's much more disturbing. What we were just discussing about he doesn't he's not of the school of thought or the Christians who see Israel as in the covenant and therefore want to connect with us to that. But in addition, he's joining the entire movement that portrays Israel as the oppressor. He wouldn't say that Israel is a colonial force, but he says that, and Dr. Munther says that Christians are horribly oppressed in Israel.
Right.
And
So
the
I
reason
want to
why
make it,
the
I
reason
want
why
to
I
make a
wanted to talk
difference.
with you and I want to
No,
frame
but I
this.
want to make a difference. I think it's important. I don't know if Tucker actually subscribes to Munther's theology. The problem is that Tucker, who usually likes to go toe to toe with people, he didn't do that in this art,
That's
in this
really true.
interview. And that's the problem
I
on
mean,
Tucker.
even
Why is it
Pierce,
that you're okay to do toe to toe with other people, but you allowed to give somebody this amount of time without going toe to toe
even
with that
even
person?
Piers Morgan, when a Hamas person comes on and says, "Oh, we did not kill any civilians," he called their BS. So Tucker, the fact that he did not call out the Hamas agenda for what it was is kind of disturbing. But the reason why, one of the reasons I asked you to come on is, first of all, for people who don't know, David has a very powerful, unique connection with Christians. He was what was your position at the CCJUC?
No, so first, I worked with the Israeli consul in New York. I was the director of Christian Affairs, and then
Oh,
for
really? I
14
didn't
years,
know
I
that about you.
served.
Okay.
Yeah, I served so the whole International Day of Prayer for the Peace of Jerusalem with Bishop Robert Stearns came out from my office.
Oh, lovely.
The first Christian birthright program of Christian students going to Israel came out from my office back in the Israeli consulate days from 2000 to 2004. I also served with Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, my former position as executive director for the Or Torah Stone Center for Jewish Christian Understanding and Cooperation. You were trying to get the acronym CJCUC. That's
Yeah, it
what it was
always
known back
confused me.
then.
It's
It's
got a
okay.
bunch
All
of
the
C's.
J's,
It's
all the
got a J
C's,
in
and not
there. Yeah.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
But Rabbi Riskin and I opened up the first Orthodox Jewish institution in the world to proactively work with Christians across denominations because we believe that Judaism has a worldview, that Judaism needs its own religious foreign ministry to interface with other faith communities. But our calling specifically, when I was working with Rabbi Riskin, was with Christians who have a heart for Israel. We actually took a very proactive perspective in working with Christians who say they love us, as opposed to working with Christians and convincing them to hate us less, which is a lot of times the mainstream of Jewish Christian relations. I work with the mainstream to say, please love me. Look what I'm doing. As opposed to trying to be loved by people who don't love us, I rather nurture and advance the relationship with people who have a heart with
There's a
us.
huge difference. There's none of this high-tech nation, the democracy in the Middle East. It's like, look, we're the Jews in Israel. You've read about us in a few books somewhere. You know? So wait, but also what you're doing, there's two more things I
Right.
want.
I'm doing right now is I'm the executive director for the Isaiah Projects, which is an organization creating Hebraic resources for Christians to discover the roots of their faith, and a specific focus with homeschool education. We're fusing Hebraic thought with critical thinking skills. So we launched something called Biblical Excavation. So we came out with a curriculum. But since October 8th, I stopped everything
Wait.
to,
Okay, but I'll come back to that. Okay.
okay.
I also, the reason why I wanted to talk to you was when Tucker brought in this guy who's saying, "Oh, Israel's so horrible to the Christians." Um, can we talk about what you did in Bethlehem? Are we allowed to
So
talk
for
about it?
years, and I still continue to do so, we help out the Christians who are financially challenged to put food on the table. I've been doing that for a long time. Um, Even though I'm no longer with the Center for Jewish Christian Understanding and Cooperation, when I started the Isaiah projects, we still to continue to help Christians in the Holy Land. And in fact, you can look this up at CBN. You can do a David Nekrutman CBN Google search. We actually rescued a Gazan Christian widow whose husband was murdered and thought he could murder her husband because there's less than 1,000 Christians amongst almost 1.8 million Muslims living in Gaza. And he thought he could go ahead and get the property from this Christian individual, murdered him to the credit. I want to make this very clear. To the credit to the Palestinian Authority and to the surprise of us, the person was arrested, and my understanding he's still in jail. But we found out that this woman's life, this widow, was her life was at stake. So we helped to
And
put her in a safe place.
and you used to actually go into Bethlehem, which is really dicey, if not illegal. And
I went to Bethlehem prior to October 7th. That is correct.
right, to bring food and aid to Christians in Bethlehem. And one of the things that disturbs me is these people try to say, "Oh, Israel is bad to the Christians," and I'm like, and they'll point to Bethlehem and say, "Yeah, you see, since Israel, took over Bethlehem, all the Christians have moved out." And it's like, no, since the Palestinian Authority took over Bethlehem and the IDF left Bethlehem, that's really when the Christian exit. It used to be more than 80% Jewish, more than 80% Christian,
80% Christian.
and now
Yeah.
it's
And now
less
it's
than 20.
15.
Yeah,
15% Christian.
which is, I mean, it's Bethlehem, and
Right.
and a large reason is because of straight up oppression, violence against targeting Christians. It's not good for Christians under the Palestinian Authority. So when I hear
Right.
this,
But it's even worse under Hamas and Gaza. I think we have to make a
for sure,
differentiation, which wasn't really articulated in Tucker Carlson's interview. There's a difference between
that's
being a
it.
Christian in Gaza under Hamas, that's a terrorist organization that rips off its people to take the monies to build an underground tunnel network for the purposes of a. So all that money invested in tunnels were supposed to go to the people. Not only that, you have UNRWA, who as employees is affiliated with Hamas. To the extent we can do that for a different show. But I think everything came out after October 7th, where UNRWA is, as far as this is concerned. And there's a difference between a Christian living under the Palestinian Authority, such as a place in Bethlehem or Ramallah. It doesn't mean everything is hunky-dory, but it's better than being a Christian in Gaza. And then if you're a Christian within the state of Israel, including East Jerusalem, which is one of those things that Munther Isaac decided to put into the fray. East Jerusalem's under the state of Israel. So they have freedom of religion. Right now, Christians are going to church. They have equal benefits and rights as any citizen of Israel. So there are about 180,000 Christian Arabs indigenous to the land, with hundreds of thousands also who are part of the Christian community that are not Christian Arab, but they're Christians. They're either Russians that came over under the guise of the return of the law of return, which is another discussion. Then you have foreign workers that come here, also are Christian. They have the rights, just like us as Israelis, healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. So there is a quite difference between this. Not only that, if I want to make this very clear, if Munther Isaac decides to criticize Hamas, he won't be around. If Munther Isaac decides to go ahead and criticize Israel, well, he's no different than Haaretz, one of our left-leaning liberal newspapers out there, expressing opinions that have been contrary to Israeli mainstream opinions since 1948. But the point is, he won't be hurt physically, anything like that. He won't be arrested.
Silenced. He won't be right.
It won't be silenced, anything like that. And I think that was a dishonest thing. This is where Tucker Carlson could have had a moment and just say, whoa, can we just separate what it means to be a Christian in these different locations? And I'm not saying that East Jerusalem, I mean, living as a Christian in East Jerusalem among mostly a Muslim population, this is important. Okay? Most of East Jerusalem is Muslim, not Christian. It's not easy for the Christian to be able to express their faith within the Muslim neighborhoods in East Jerusalem, but still under the state of Israel. I want to make that very, very clear. So that's the nuance. Tucker Carlson could have had a moment. He blew it. I think he blew it because, again, I think Tucker Carlson is there for that particular interview to amplify clickbait, whatever he's doing, likes, getting for us actually to talk about this. And came on, as I said to you beforehand, is we need to clearly define the nuances at the end of the day. So I would say for a Christian, Jesus is a Jew, not was a Jew, is a Jew according to Christian theology. He was part of our family
From the
before
tribe
he
of
became the
Judah.
savior for the Christians.
From the tribe of Judah, lived in Nazareth, which was Jewish, then moved to Bethlehem, which was
Everything
Judean.
about Jesus was Jewish. To put Jesus outside of his identity of his Jewishness is actually being anti-Semitic, in my humble opinion. I know that's a
I
controversial,
think it's
loaded
being
statement.
anti-Christian. I don't know.
No,
It's like,
but you somehow you have to believe in a Jesus devoid of his Jewishness, and somehow that's okay. Again, if Tucker Carlson was really Christian, in the sense that his Christianity is trumping his politics, there was a point he could have just said, Jesus is a Jew for him as a Christian. So I want to
that's
differentiate
interesting. And he
between the
didn't even call that
guests.
out. He didn't even
He
call
didn't even
that out.
call that out. And so you're so concerned about Christians that you're not even truthful to Christian theology at the end of the day. It's for a Christian, Jesus wasn't crucified as a Jew and then resurrected as a Southern Baptist. All right, so let's just be truthful to the theology.
I want to,
For Tucker's Christianity, if he takes it seriously, then he should have defended Jesus' Jewish identity.
if I may, I want to add one more thing that I wanted to add in your credentials. David, was it you were learning for your master's at Oral Roberts University?
Yeah, got a master's of biblical literature at Oral Roberts University with a thesis in.
You see an ocean of devout Christians, and there's one little keeper stuck in there, and that was him.
Yeah, this went to Oral Roberts University. Correct. Yes.
And so, and it wasn't a confrontational relationship at all. You described it as a very positive, uplifting experience. And so when David is talking about Christian theology, he doesn't share it, but he has a deep appreciation and an understanding of it from the inside, which I suspect that Tucker Carlson may not. I don't want to judge him. I don't know, but
it's okay to judge him because he judges others at this point in time.
right.
And at the end of the day,
But
he's putting out a political perspective to be judged, to comment on. So it's not about if you're going out there to judge others, which is what he does as a pundit, then you have the expectation is once that opinion is out there for public consumption, we have a right to go ahead and look at it. And I believe we're taking a very nuanced approach here, because this is not the Tucker Carlson that I'm used to, that is willing to go toe to toe. Somehow he was okay for just giving all this time without questioning anything. And I think that's the biggest problem. That's the guest. I expect the guest to say what he did, because if you do your homework on the guest, you will see he said this stuff. He doesn't believe in his Christianity, the validity of the Jewish people. For him to say that the occupation for 75 years, I mean, really? Like, I thought Bethlehem was under Jordan from 1948 to 1967. I thought that. That's what I thought. I thought that Gaza was under Egypt from 1948 to 1967.
Judea and Samaria, it was universally recognized as an illegal occupation until 1967, between 1948 and 1967. You know, they have the saying that politics makes strange bedfellows. And that's certainly true in our day, where you have, gays for Gaza kind of thing, and it's just like, it doesn't quite make sense. There's a disconnect there, certainly a large degree of cognitive dissonance. And I think that's also what we see here with Tucker. It always, you know, the Christians who support Israel for the reasons you cited, the covenantal reasons, the biblical reasons, there's a reason there. And it's unprecedented and it goes against history, but it makes sense. The Christians who can side with people, and it's actually it was a talking point adopted by Arafat. I believe it was started by Hanan Shrawi, a Christian who was in the Palestinian Authority, that Jesus was a Palestinian. And all of a sudden I look at that and I'm like, how can any Christian accept that? It changes the identity, it changes the nature of Jesus. I mean, I always thought of Jesus as, peace on earth, goodwill to men, this what we call chesed, loving kindness. And there was one time when the Palestinian president referred to Jesus as the first shahid, the first basically suicide bomber. And I was like, wow. And then if you look at the eschatology, which I want to go into
Right,
of
but
Islam,
understand this, that liberation theology for most in the progressive side of Christianity is the dogma and creed for that particular Christian. And it's not biblically sound, but liberation
that's the
theology
point.
across the board. This is really what we do. And Munther Isaac subscribes to Palestinian liberation theology. So for him, you'll hear how he articulates Jesus being born in occupation, the Roman Empire occupation, but it's no different than the state of Israel occupation, because this is
Wow.
part of the
There, we were
Palestinian
talking about
liberation
cognitive
theology.
dissonance,
Oh
replacing
no,
Romans and saying that's the Jews. That's kind of like,
again, I'm not surprised. I think this is where I
I
think
am.
I'm not surprised that Munther Isaac believes that. I'm quite
Right.
shocked that a Christian is willing to believe that the Jews are still covenanted, that they're willing to discover the roots of their faith. They're willing to explore the Judaism of Jesus. They're willing to explore what this means that the Jewish people return back to the land of Israel and thinking in biblical terms and biblical prophecy, not for an end times theology like Munther Isaac articulated, like somehow this is all to get the Jews back in for the rapture to happen and for Jesus' return. Most Christians don't subscribe, who have a heart for Israel, do not subscribe to that end times theology, nor is their reason for support of Israel has anything to do with that theology. They do it simply because it's written in the Bible, calling was put on their heart. For me, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
What's considered mainstream for me is actually a Munther Isaac. So I think because you and I are constantly surrounded by Christians who love us and actually do something about the love for Israel in a very pure way, we are taken back by a conversation that takes place between a Tucker Carlson and a Munther Isaac. And I'm not shocked. I actually sit back and like, oh, okay. This is just old school anti-Semitism being articulated by the guest. But unfortunately, here the interviewer had a chance to go ahead and push back and didn't. Shame on
Yeah.
Tucker.
Yeah, that's where the interviewer displays his bias. Okay, David, I can't thank you enough. You really not only did you put it into perspective, but you showed that this is really a large and growing issue in Christianity. And in especially in the conservative movement and the Christian roots of the conservative movement or the Christian ethos of the conservative movement in America is going to have to cope with this. It's definitely
Right. So I do want to end off. I think this is important because uh, if Jews think that the conservative party is going to be our savior, then they're going to be sorely disappointed. At the end
right.
of the day, you have people from the Democratic Party, from the Republican Party, from someone who's libertarian, who's conservative, whatever their political affiliation. I'm not dealing so much with their politics per se. Where are they coming from their faith and their commitment to God? That's my starting point. And usually It's people who value that the human being is created in the image of God, that they understand there's an ultimate authority, and that freedom, it comes with a responsibility, and that in order for heaven to meet earth, or to bring heaven down to earth, there needs to be a partnership between Jews and Christians who are committed to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to advance his kingdom. Because at the end, this is about world redemption
And that's what's
with a
happening now.
world
That is what's
partnership.
happening in Israel.
What's
Ooh,
happening right now?
that's
Yeah,
huge what you
world
just said.
redemption. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is it. This is, you know, at the end of the day, if Tucker Carlson comes and goes, it will make news for the next week or so. Then there'll be another item in the news. We weren't even sure we were going to discuss this anyway because of what was happening with Iran. But the fact is we're discussing it. So might get another 2-3 days of play in the media. At the end, this is eternal. What we're discussing right now of the partnership between Jews and Christians is huge because it's never been done before like this.
And it's happening right now in real time.
Unprecedented. So I live in a privileged moment in history as a Jew, living and stewarding this land, that I help out the person who's most marginalized in this land. That is the Christian at the end of the day. My duty, my stewardship as a Jew is to make sure that the person, this Christian, in the image of God is uplifted. That's how I feel my responsibility is, along with helping out with everything else that's going on with the war and everything else. But if I'm truly about what this land represents, a covenant, then I have to, covenant land comes with covenant responsibility. And that means no one should be oppressed
I want a bumper
in this
sticker.
land. Everyone should be uplifted.
I want a
But
bumper sticker
this
that
is serious
says that.
stuff because Tucker to me at the end of the day is again important thing to talk about. But more importantly, is that right now, everything has unveiled after October 7th. Church is pretty much silent. I know that we deal with Christians who are not silent, but most of the churches
Right.
are not talking about this.
Right.
And what's quite interesting is I was listening to Bishop Robert Stearns on his live broadcast early in the morning. And he was saying, if your church is not praying about Israel, may want to think about leaving. Well, that's for him to say, okay? But at the end of the day, I think that one of the reasons why he's saying that, and I've seen this so far, is the church so far has been primarily silent for fear of that there could be congregants who are extremely who are pro-Hamas, and this will upset the congregation, and whatever happens, happens. And I think at this point in time, you see the veil being taken off and being exposed. Because I can even say this to you: how many people were brought to Israel by our own shekel taxes? Right? The Ministry of Tourism has brought, I don't know how many people, they invested in how many pastors to come to Israel. I'm waiting for some of these pastors actually to give me a call.
Well,
silent. I know I've taken pastors to Israel and I still haven't heard from them yet. Like, it would be nice to get an email. I'm curious of how many tour guides actually got an email from the amount of Christians they led throughout the years to see if how is everything doing.
but it
I
is.
don't think this is the discussion for me. It's like, wait a second, where are you? And obviously, we know of the Christian organizations that really are out there. You have the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem, you have Christians for Peace, you have Christians for Israel, Christian Friends of Israel, Christians United for Israel, you have Eagles Wings. I could go on and on of the many organizations out there. However, they only represent a remnant. And greater Christianity has been silent. And then on the left and progressive side, the vocalization of being completely pro-Hamas is staggering.
It is staggering. I will say that I personally have merited an outpouring of love from the Peninsula Christian, from the simple Christians who I've connected with. There's really been an unbelievably touching outpouring of love, of prayer. But like you said, the churches itself, the leaders and the movements, and disturbingly silent. You know, I
I
mean,
predicted this. I said this. Someone, we had a denomination asked me to a Christian Zionist organization asked me to go ahead and give some words of what I think the future would be. And this is the week of October 7th. I said, I'm going to tell you this. For the first week or two, you will find the world on our side. And then right afterwards, you're going to find, once we start responding, then you're going to see a complete marginalization. I never knew the extent of where that would actually take place.
Yeah.
But oh my God, where the world has gone, that pro-Palestinian means pro-Hamas. I, in my wildest dreams, never thought of that. But that's
The
exactly
son
what's
of
happened.
that guy they refer to as the son of Hamas, he's saying
Yeah.
that. He's saying there is no such thing as a Palestinian anymore. It's Hamas. They are all Hamas. And even what was her name? The hostage who was released, who she was like a total left-wing young peacenik, and then she was like, no, there's no innocence there. That's from the Palestinian side. But I'm like, yeah, you're right. There has not been a strong outpouring of support from major Christian organizations,
Which you would have thought
which you would
if
have
there was
thought.
truly the right. That my thing is that I'm looking at if the listen whoever's listening right now, I want to make it very clear. I am so grateful to be part of a calling that's way above me, bridge the gap between Jews and Christians. And I've dedicated 23 years to this. And I continue to do it because I feel a calling and it's what's needed, and whatever I can contribute, it's great. But at the end of the day, we say this in Hebrew, Yotze min haklal. The people who are involved in this are an exception to the
Yeah,
rule.
yeah,
The rule is uh, being very passive about it or not even talking about it. And so you have two sides, the vocal against Israel to the people who are vocal who support Israel. And those are the people, that's the battle between both. But the rest, which is the majority, might say, yes, yeah, I like the state of Israel for a poll. But liking doesn't mean being active for the call of Israel.
okay, David, we gotta get back together one day. We haven't met each other in a long time.
I know.
I don't do beer, but I do coffee, so
I do coffee too.
yeah,
Okay.
we all do.
Thanks for the
Especially today.
opportunity.
Thank you, David. You've walked me through a lot of incredibly complicated issues, what I call dancing through the minefields. And you've done it once again. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Be blessed,
God
y'all,
bless.
from Israel.